Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
It began, as so many modern controversies do, with whispers online.
It sounds fake.
Small comments tucked beneath royal news clips, faint questions in podcast transcripts, and the occasional tweet that seemed too bold, too absurd to be true.
It's just so disgusting.
At first, no one took them seriously. A few suspicious minds claimed that the story of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, the son of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, wasn't as it appeared. But in the roaring echo chamber of the internet, even a whisper can become a storm.
It was a dreadful thing to do, and actually completely wrong.
Over time, that storm became a headline. By 2020, speculation around the Sussexes' private family life had spiraled far beyond reason.
Take a listen.
This scandal comes as no surprise. Speculation about the children has been simmering for years.
From birth certificates to photographs, hospital reports to Netflix documentaries, everything they did was scrutinized, dissected, and reinterpreted.
I was instantly enraged from this 10-second clip. It just annoyed me.
And yet, no matter how many statements were released, no matter how many official announcements were made, suspicion refused to die. Why? Why did this particular story, this particular couple ignite such fevered disbelief?
It doesn't make you sound like a better mom. It makes you sound really kind of into yourself in a way.
Was it the secrecy surrounding the birth? The media's hunger for scandal? Or something deeper? A cultural fascination with truth, control, and the image of royalty itself. Tonight, we revisit the timeline, the claims, the contradictions, and the coverage. Not to prove or disprove rumor, but to understand why it took root. This is the story of how a royal birth became a lightning rod for mistrust, manipulation, and media obsession. The first act of this drama unfolded in early May 2019. The world was watching. Royal reporters had gathered outside hospitals, betting on where the Duchess would deliver. Traditionally, such moments followed an unbroken script. A proud father steps out, a brief announcement, an appearance on the hospital steps, and then the photo that defines a generation. But Meghan and Harry had other plans. They had already made a decision that broke decades of royal tradition. There would be no public birth announcement, no press outside the hospital, no predictable photo op. Privacy, they said, was paramount. Harry told the media later that day with a radiant grin, "I'm just over the moon." The couple thanked well-wishers and promised a photo session in 2 days' time. But almost instantly, confusion struck. The official royal communications had first said Meghan was in labor, and then, barely an hour later, that the baby had already been born, hours earlier. For seasoned royal correspondents, this was unheard of. One BBC anchor famously stammered live on air, "Wait, she's already had the baby?" It seemed like a simple miscommunication, but in the online world, it became fuel. Comment sections lit up. Why the secrecy? Why the delay? Why didn't anyone see the Duchess enter or leave hospital? None of it was evidence of wrongdoing. But in the digital age, absence itself is treated as proof of something hidden. And the story began to grow. When Prince Harry released his memoir Spare in 2023, he revisited that day. He wrote of rushing Meghan to the Portland hospital, of her enduring the pain of labor with 2 epidurals, and of their quiet joy after Archie's arrival. For millions of readers, it was an intimate, human detail. But for skeptics online, it reignited questions. Doctors, nurses, and even mothers took to forums and podcasts, debating whether 2 epidurals were medically plausible within such a short labor. Some argued it was possible. Others claimed it was inconsistent with typical practice. And once again, a medical footnote turned into a global talking point. American commentator Candace Owens, never one to stay silent, went viral when she ranted on her show. It just annoyed me. The whole performance of it. Why are there so many contradictions? Her words echoed a sentiment that was already spreading, that the Sussexes' version of events had become more of a performance than a transparent account. Of course, no credible source ever produced evidence to contradict the official record. But what mattered wasn't proof, it was perception. And perception, in the age of social media, can be far more powerful than truth. The tabloids pounced. Headlines in The Sun, Daily Mail, and The Mirror alternated between admiration and accusation. One week, Meghan was praised for privacy. The next, she was accused of deception. Anonymous insiders claimed inconsistencies in timing. Royal correspondents speculated on everything from birth certificates to the name choice itself. An investigative reporter from The Times later admitted, off the record, it wasn't about truth. It was about control. Who controlled the story? In a world where monarchy meets Hollywood, narrative is currency. And Meghan Markle, an actress turned duchess, had always been fluent in narrative. To her critics, that was the problem. To her supporters, it was her strength. By late 2019, YouTube channels and blogs began producing long-form breakdowns of the royal birth timeline. Some claimed inconsistencies between Harry's interviews and official palace statements. Others analyzed hospital footage, body language, even maternity fashion. A few voices went further, spinning elaborate conspiracy theories about surrogacy and secrecy. Theories that quickly went viral despite being completely unverified. British journalist Afua Hirsch later observed, "This wasn't about evidence. It was about emotion. People projecting their feelings about power, privilege, and authenticity." Indeed, much of the online speculation came not from experts but from fans. Those who felt invested in the monarchy's mythology, and betrayed when that mythology didn't behave predictably. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides were reportedly alarmed. The Sussexes' relationship with the British press was already fractured beyond repair. The couple had just launched lawsuits against the Mail on Sunday for publishing a private letter Meghan had written to her father. To palace officials, the growing conspiracy chatter was both absurd and dangerous. Yet, paradoxically, their silence made it worse. When institutions that thrive on ceremony refuse to explain deviations from tradition, it invites imagination to fill the gap. And imagination, once unleashed, becomes unstoppable. Commentator Piers Morgan, one of Meghan's fiercest critics, declared on Good Morning Britain, "They can't expect to trade on their royal titles, make money off their fame, and then hide behind privacy when it suits them. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that." To him, secrecy equaled manipulation. But supporters saw things differently. Actress Jamila Jamil countered on Twitter, "The woman wanted privacy during childbirth. The press turned that into a crime. This is how misogyny works." Thus, the debate split into two camps, not over fact, but over principle. Was this a matter of deceit or of autonomy? And could both be true in different eyes? By 2021, when the Sussexes sat down with Oprah Winfrey for their now famous interview, the tension had reached a breaking point. Millions watched as Meghan described feeling trapped by the royal institution, claiming she had been denied support when struggling with mental health. For supporters, it was vindication. For critics, it was more performance. Even Oprah, a master of calm, seemed stunned by the emotional volatility of her guests. When the topic of Archie arose, including the palace's alleged discussions about his title and security, the public conversation about his birth, once confined to gossip forums, burst into the mainstream, not because of what was said, but because of what was implied, that somewhere, somehow, the establishment itself had mishandled the truth. The deeper question wasn't whether Meghan's birth story was inconsistent. It was why millions wanted it to be. What drives a society to doubt a royal baby's very existence? Dr. Kate Williams, historian and royal expert, summed it up. In the old days, the monarchy existed behind glass. We saw only what they wanted us to see. Social media shattered that illusion. Now, everyone feels entitled to peek behind the curtain. That new dynamic, she explained, breeds mistrust. Transparency isn't a virtue anymore. It's an addiction. The media's obsession soon reached surreal proportions. Every photo of Archie was analyzed. Comparisons were drawn to cousins, grandparents, even distant relatives. When the Sussexes released an image showing the baby's feet in Meghan's hand, tabloids ran side-by-side features asking why his face wasn't visible. One columnist for The Telegraph confessed, "We were writing about shadows, about what wasn't there. It was madness." Still, the clicks kept coming. And in the attention economy, madness pays. Meanwhile, commentators like Candace Owens and Piers Morgan continued to weaponize the story, not because they cared about medical details, but because it symbolized something bigger: the perceived war between authenticity and image, between British tradition and American celebrity. Owens said on her podcast, "It's like she's playing a human being, like it's a performance." The quote, harsh as it was, encapsulated the growing cynicism of the era, a disbelief not only in institutions but in individuals themselves. In the court of public opinion, sincerity is the rarest currency of all. Yet, through all of this, one fact remained: neither the palace nor the Sussexes ever confirmed, denied, or meaningfully engaged with the online claims. Perhaps they didn't need to. Perhaps they understood that truth doesn't win arguments online. Attention does. And in that metric, both sides were winning. When Harry later wrote in Spare about his wife's exhaustion, her private pain, and the cruelty of public speculation, many readers finally saw the human toll. He described driving her home with baby Archie in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, overwhelmed with emotion. Whether or not every logistical detail aligned with hospital procedure was irrelevant. What mattered was the vulnerability, and how easily it had been twisted by strangers into something sinister. It became clear that this wasn't just a royal scandal. It was a mirror, a reflection of how modern audiences consume, and sometimes create, their own truth. Media theorist Dr. Sarah Churchwell said it best: "The Meghan and Harry story isn't about monarchy. It's about mythology. Every time we think we're uncovering lies, we're really uncovering our own projections." And in that light, the so-called surrogacy scandal wasn't a royal mystery at all. It was a cultural one, a symptom of a world that no longer trusts what it sees. Still, rumors linger. They always do. New TikToks emerge, old interviews resurface, and each retelling revives the same sense of unease. Not because anyone believes it's true, but because no one can be certain it isn't. That tiny sliver of uncertainty is the oxygen that keeps conspiracy alive. In the end, the story of Archie's birth says far less about the Sussexes than it does about us, about the audience, the media, the hunger for spectacle. Because when fame meets royalty, privacy becomes performance. And when performance meets disbelief, even truth looks suspicious. The Sussexes, willingly or not, became protagonists in a 21st century morality play. One where authenticity and illusion blur until neither can stand alone. And perhaps that is the real tragedy. Not that the world questioned a royal birth, but that we've lost the ability to believe anything without tearing it apart first. As the documentary fades to black, the narrator's voice softens. Maybe the truth was simple all along. Maybe it was just a couple wanting privacy in a world that refuses to allow it. Or maybe, as some insist, there's still more beneath the surface. In the age of endless stories, perhaps the only thing we can't stand is silence. Fade out, ambient strings, montage of headlines dissolving into darkness. This has been The Royal Mystery. How media speculation about Archie's birth shook the monarchy. A Crown and Controversy production. It started with what seemed like an ordinary royal birth story. The celebration of new life, a beacon of hope for the monarchy's modern image. But as details began to emerge, the picture painted by Meghan Markle and Prince Harry began to unravel, thread by thread. What should have been a straightforward narrative soon twisted into something far murkier. A tapestry woven with contradictions, inconsistencies, and a level of secrecy that defied logic. Beneath the smiles, the glossy magazine covers, and the soft focus interviews, something didn't fit. And once you notice one inconsistency, you can't stop seeing them all. At first glance, the story seemed harmless enough. A difficult labor, multiple epidurals, and a same-day discharge from one of London's most prestigious hospitals. But for anyone even slightly familiar with obstetrics, that detail sets off alarms. Medical experts quickly pointed out that a combination of multiple epidurals and immediate discharge isn't just unusual. It's nearly impossible. Epidurals, powerful anesthetic procedures that require careful monitoring, can affect blood pressure, motor control, and nerve response for hours, sometimes even days. To be discharged the very same day? That's not a triumph of privilege. That's a violation of standard medical safety. When obstetricians were asked about the claim, many couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. They described it as medically implausible, reckless, even dangerously misleading. Hospitals don't release patients under such conditions because complications can arise suddenly. Infection, nerve damage, internal bleeding, or preeclampsia-related emergencies. These are not minor inconveniences. They are life-threatening realities that demand continuous observation. Yet, the Sussexes' story would have the world believe that Meghan, after what Harry described as an intense birth, simply walked out the door and went home like it was nothing. And this is where the first shadow falls. A small contradiction, but one that opens a door. Was this simply a misunderstanding? An innocent misinterpretation of medical jargon by a couple unfamiliar with the technicalities of childbirth? Or was it something far more deliberate? A calculated shaping of the story to seem extraordinary, perhaps even miraculous. Because once you start pulling at that thread, the rest of the fabric begins to tear. Meghan herself once said, "You need proof that I'm authentic. I just dropped myself twerking." It was meant as a joke, a soundbite to humanize her. But in the context of these inconsistencies, the quote takes on a strange irony. Authenticity has become the very thing in question. Childbirth isn't something you simply walk away from after a few hours. Even in uncomplicated cases, new mothers are monitored closely. Blood pressure, temperature, post-epidural recovery, uterine contraction, bleeding, every factor is meticulously checked before discharge. Hospitals, especially ones like Portland, pride themselves on their protocols. And when preeclampsia, a dangerous pregnancy complication Meghan herself mentioned in interviews, enters the mix, same-day release becomes not just unusual, but impossible. Preeclampsia can cause seizures, organ failure, or even death. Women who experience it are typically hospitalized for days, sometimes weeks, to ensure their body stabilizes. Yet, in Harry's memoir, Spare, he paints a picture of speed and convenience. Multiple epidurals, a few intense hours, and then home before the day was done. It reads like a scene from a movie. But childbirth isn't cinematic. It's clinical, cautious, and steeped in procedure. The more you read, the less it feels like fact and the more it feels like performance. Medical experts reviewing this account have called it implausible, irresponsible, and publicly misleading. The contradictions become even sharper when you remember that Meghan has built much of her public advocacy around maternal health and proper postnatal care. She's spoken passionately about the need for women to be observed and protected after birth. Yet, her own account, if true, contradicts every standard she champions. And if it's not true, then we must ask, why fabricate? Was it to reinforce her image as resilient, strong, almost superhuman? Was it a bid to maintain control over a narrative the palace could not touch? Or was it simply a misunderstanding blown out of proportion? Whichever the case, these details have consequences. Because when public figures contradict themselves on something as serious as medical truth, the cracks begin to spread. And those cracks were noticed, not just by journalists, but by insiders. Behind the walls of Portland Hospital, quiet whispers began to circulate. Staff members, speaking anonymously, told stories that didn't match the royal version. One described a far more subdued, private stay, with no dramatic rush or late-night emergency requests. Another questioned Harry's colorful anecdote about ordering gourmet comfort food in the middle of the night. Yes, the hospital offers fine dining, but not quite the call and it appears fantasy described in Spare. Then there was the mysterious elevator. Harry vividly recounted a secret route, a hidden passageway designed to whisk them away from prying eyes. But longtime employees have quietly said otherwise. Portland is indeed discreet, but not mythical. There is no royal-only elevator buried behind locked doors. There are private corridors, yes, but nothing like the clandestine tunnel Harry described. The reality was far more ordinary, and therein lies the problem. The more extraordinary the tale becomes, the further it drifts from truth. Each inconsistency on its own might seem trivial, but together they form a pattern. A pattern that suggests the story wasn't simply told, it was curated. Crafted for effect, perhaps to evoke sympathy or to frame Meghan as a woman battling impossible odds. And once those quiet testimonies began to surface, the official timeline started to fracture under scrutiny. It didn't take long for commentators to seize on the contradictions. Among them, Candace Owens, a vocal critic of the Sussexes, dissected these inconsistencies piece by piece. Her argument was simple yet cutting. If small details in a story collapse under scrutiny, how can the larger claims be trusted? And she had a point. Why include medical specifics like 2 epidurals and same-day discharge in the first place? Was it to highlight Meghan's endurance, or to dramatize the birth for memoir-worthy flair? Because once those details are published, they invite analysis. And analysis is what shattered the illusion. As each piece of the puzzle was examined, the timeline itself began to disintegrate. Nothing quite matched up. Not the hospital accounts, not the logistics, not even the timeline of Meghan's own recovery as later depicted in public appearances. Every blurred detail became another crack in the credibility of the Sussex narrative. For some, this wasn't about medicine at all. It was about control. Meghan and Harry had long felt trapped by the palace machine, the press, and public expectations. Perhaps they wanted a story entirely their own, one no royal aide could edit or leak. But the paradox is that in trying to control the narrative, they may have sacrificed its believability. Public trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it doesn't mend easily. And by the time the inconsistencies hit the media, trust was already slipping. The very transparency Meghan and Harry had promised was now clouded in suspicion. People started asking, if the birth story isn't straight, what else might be embellished? Candace Owens amplified that question to millions, turning skepticism into spectacle. Her commentary may have been controversial, but it resonated. If they can't be honest about something as intimate as a birth, she said, then what hope is there for honesty elsewhere? And that's where this story takes its most unsettling turn. Because no matter what you believe, whether you see Meghan as misunderstood or manipulative, the facts don't line up neatly. Every attempt to clarify seems to deepen the confusion. Every explanation feels more like damage control than truth. The public is left with a haunting dilemma. Either Meghan's story was genuine but sloppily told, or it was strategically shaped for sympathy. Both possibilities carry weight, and both cast long shadows. So we're left with one question. The same question that echoes through every royal controversy. Why? Why would someone so vocal about women's health and honesty craft a story riddled with contradictions? Why would the details of something so sacred be wrapped in mystery? Perhaps it was never about deception, but perception. Controlling how the world sees you before the world decides for itself. Perhaps it was about crafting legend rather than confessing reality. Or perhaps, as cynics claim, it was about power. The power to manipulate sympathy and shape headlines in your favor. Whatever the reason, the outcome remains the same. Every blurred line, every misstep, every contradiction eroded public confidence. What began as a moment of celebration became a magnet for doubt. And so the story ends not with resolution, but with unease. Because truth, once questioned, rarely returns to clarity. Candace Owens may have thrown fuel on the fire, but the flames were already burning. The timelines clash, the details crumble, and the silence from those who could clarify it all only deepens the mystery. Whether you see this as tragedy, manipulation, or simple miscommunication, one thing is clear. The royal fairy tale has cracks that no PR statement can mend. And if the pregnancy timeline was confusing, just wait. Because the next chapter, involving Meghan's age scandal and her father's shocking claims, makes this story look almost tame. This is where the illusion begins to fracture completely, and where the truth, however uncomfortable, starts to emerge. So before you look away, ask yourself, if one story falls apart under scrutiny, how many others might already be crumbling in silence? Stay with us. The truth, as always, is closer and stranger than you think. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals one scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.